TCU Basketball takes care of business at home against Cincinnati. Quick turnaround. They play Baylor tonight. Can they get the season sweep of the Bears? That's coming up next here on Locked On Horned Frogs, your team every day.
You are Locked On Horned Frogs, your daily podcast on the TCU Horned Frogs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
That's right, Locked On Horned Frogs, your team every day. We're free and available wherever it is you get your podcast. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. Also subscribe wherever it is you listen to podcasts in its audio form. Packed show today. We're talking basketball, football, and baseball. We'll start with basketball as we're getting closer to the end of the regular season, Big 12 tournament, NCAA tournament coming up quickly. Hopefully the Frogs are a lock for the NCAA tournament. Seems like they're trending the right way. The men's team, they get a victory over Cincinnati over the weekend as TCU takes down the Bearcats 75-57. They are now 8-6 in conference play, getting a little revenge for that bad loss earlier in the year on the road in Cincinnati where they had a lead late and just blew it going into overtime. Couldn't find a way to win that ball game. But a nice victory. I mean, honestly, pretty stress-free. TCU got out to an 8-0 lead. They had a really nice play off the tip where they got Micah Peavy on a back cut and got a dunk for him immediately. Avery Anderson and a couple threes. They're up 8-0. But Cincinnati crawled back in that game, briefly took the lead about midway through the first half. TCU had a nice run before halftime and then never really looked back. Played great defense, especially in the second half of that ball game, holding Cincinnati to 25 points in the second half, 35% from three for the Bearcats, 41% from the field. So all around pretty good day for Jamie Dixon's squad on that side of the ball on defense. Ernest Uday was not available. He is still dealing with an ankle injury that he suffered against Texas Tech, or not against Texas Tech. I guess that was against Kansas State last Saturday. He missed the Tech game, and then he also missed the game against Cincinnati. So pretty imperative that he plays tonight. I know Jamie Dixon. I thought it was kind of weird how he phrased this. Jamie Plunkett from 247 Sports had this quote and said that there's no structural damage. Essentially, Jamie said there's no structural damage. He's gone through the rehab process. It's basically up to him now. I thought that was a weird way to phrase it. Maybe I was reading too much into it. I was like, okay, are you guys – I mean, surely this is a collaborative decision. Are you just saying you've cleared him and it's now just up to whether or not he wants to go, or is it pain tolerance? I don't know. But they play Baylor tonight, and Messi, the big 7-footer for the Bears – he had a field day against TCU in the first matchup, which was a win on the road in triple overtime. Messi had 25 points, but you really need Ernest Uday to help against Yves Messi because he is a scorer down low. He's really good at rolling. You have to pay so much attention to those guards and guarding the three-point line that it's tough to also check guys inside. But hopefully Ernest Uday is available and ready to go tonight against a Baylor team that has some size. If he's not, I will say this, and honestly, regardless of kind of where he is health-wise, Essa Mufasa has given TCU some great minutes over the last few games. And he only had 7 points against Cincinnati, but he was 2 of 4 from the field. He had a 3-point play. He's pretty skilled in the post. I mean, you're not going to run your offense through him or anything, but he's done a good job getting rebounds. He's done a good job scoring. So you lose some athleticism with him on the floor. I mean, I think Cork and Uday are obviously better athletes and better defenders, and they can do more in the pick and roll. But it's just funny to watch him work in the post. I mean, he's got the color commentator in that ballgame in Cincinnati kind of compared it to like an old man at the Y, like an old man's game at the Y. He's pretty crafty when he gets the ball down low. And so I wouldn't mind seeing him in some ISO situations, but I think this is going to be a tough matchup with the athleticism that Baylor has. And then, also on Baylor's side, Langston Love is questionable for tonight. So he's a guy that could possibly play if he's, healthy enough. He's been game to game or day to day for a few weeks now. But Langston Love's a good scorer for the Bears, and he adds another element to that. But for TCU, I'd really like to see Mustafa play more. I mean, I think he brings you good minutes. And maybe it's just a defensive issue or athleticism issue, but I think Mustafa gives them some good some good minutes, especially on offense, where he can go down there and score and kind of give them a different look than they typically have with the guys they have in the post, because Cork and Uday aren't really guys that you can set up those types of opportunities for. Cork occasionally, but it just looked like there was kind of a different element there. It doesn't have to be all the time, but I just like to see him get some more run regardless of what Uday's health situation is. But TCU Baylor tonight, Baylor's kind of a strange team to me. They're coming off a loss to Houston, and you hope that there's kind of an emotional letdown after what was a pretty brutal overtime loss for them to the Cougars. Now, I think they'll also come out motivated. And sometimes, it's tough to tell with basketball. Sometimes those quick turnarounds are good because it's just like, all right, whatever happened, you flush it and you go play and you get on the court immediately. It's not like it's a long road trip from Waco to Fort Worth. But I do feel like there's a good opportunity here for TCU to pick up a victory and get to 9-6 in conference play, and a season sweep of Baylor would look really good on the tournament resume. I don't know what's like. We'll see where the team finishes. I don't know why Joe Lunardi dislikes them so much. And I understand. You can say, okay, yeah, TCU needs to schedule better in non-conference play. Jamie Dixon needs to go find better teams to play. Now, the two teams they played that were anywhere near decent, they lost to this preseason, which maybe that affects it a little bit. But we're talking about the best basketball conference in the nation. Okay, TCU's played plenty of quality opponents. Basically, every team they play in conference play, aside from West Virginia, is a quality opponent. It's going to be a quad 2 or quad 3 at least victory. And so if you finish in the top half of this league, which the Frogs have a chance to do, you're better than a 9 seed or a 10 seed. I don't understand why. Lunardi had them on the bubble for a while. I was reading stuff this weekend of like, if they lose to Cincinnati, TCU's in a pretty perilous situation. And it wouldn't be good to lose to Cincy. I thought that was a must win. They need to go win that ball game. But, I think if you find a way to get the 9 wins in this league, you should firmly be in the tournament and you should have a good shot to be like a 6 or a 7 seed. So we'll see what happens here down the stretch. But this would be a big win if they could get it done against the Bears, even at home. That's another ranked victory. And Baylor's kind of a strange team because at times they look like, they'll get their offensive motion going. They'll hit some threes, and they're really tough to stop. And you watch them, and you're like, man, this looks like one of the better teams in the nation. But then they'll go through some cold stretches as well. And, they blew a 10-point lead to TCU at home. They've had trouble closing games, and similarly to TCU at times. And this is a young group that Scott Drew has, but they've had issues finding ways to close games and get it done on a consistent basis. So good opportunity for the Frogs tonight. A couple other things that stood out from the game on Saturday. Jacoby Coles had probably his best game of the year, 18 points, a really efficient shooting day, 6 of 10 from the field, 2 of 4 from 3. Got to the line 4 times, made all 4 free throws. He's looking more and more comfortable. And here's a question I had for you guys, the audience, and you can hit me up on the YouTube comments or you can tweet at me at SimcockSteven. It doesn't really matter as far as this team and kind of what they're going to do moving forward, but it's just something that I was thinking about this weekend. Who's the best player on this TCU basketball team? And not even like in a go-to guy sense. Just who's the best player on the team? Because it feels like it's gone through phases all year long. Now, if I had to say it, or just if I had to give an opinion on it, which I do, I guess, because I have a podcast, but I would say it's Emmanuel Miller. I think Emmanuel Miller is their most complete player. I think he's their most consistent player. He's had a few rough games this year, but by and large, he's the guy that's going to give you double-digit points, close to double-digit rebounds. He's going to play good defense. His effort's always, quality. Like, he gets it done. Good mid-range shooter. Has added the ability to hit the 3 this year on a more consistent basis. You can run the offense through him at times. I think he's their best player. But, there's been time early in the year, Jacoby Coles was kind of the guy. Before the season, Jameer Nelson Jr. was the player that got most of the headlines, and most people were saying, okay, this is the dude now. He's going to take over. Early in the year, they were trying to run the offense through Coles for the most part. That was kind of hit or miss, and then Coles went down with an injury, and it took him a while to get back to full strength. He said last week that he was dealing with plantar fasciitis all year, and so it's been a challenge for him to finally get to a place where he's healthy. Avery Anderson had a really nice start to the year and then kind of cooled off. Jameer Nelson Jr. has had his moments. But I think Emmanuel Miller's the best player. But I'm just curious because it feels like each and every week, and it's not even necessarily a negative. I think in some ways it's a good thing. Somebody else is stepping up and making plays. And Jacoby Coles might be that guy as we get closer to the postseason that is your best option if you need a tough bucket. Like who can go get a bucket in a tough situation and make contested shots. And even if it's not there on offense, even if you're not in a great rhythm, who can sort of take over and get you on the right path. Because one thing that has been consistent about this team is they have a 5 or 6 minute scoring drought from the field almost every night. I mean, it's just – and they just have to survive it. They have to find a way to stay in it, and they usually make a run. I mean, Micah Peavy's been good too. There's just a lot of names that come to mind. And it makes me wonder, there's constantly, when we talk about TCU basketball, there's constantly a discussion about Jamie Dixon and the coaching job that he's doing, which is totally fair. I mean, we can have discussions about that. I think that's fine. But I do wonder. I mean, I think this is – now the results are going to be the results, and that's how we judge this by and large. Coming into the year, TCU, I feel like the expectation was that they could be a tournament team. But they lost a lot with Mike Miles and Damian Ball. And in some ways, I feel like this is one of his better coaching jobs. Now, there's still games to be played, so that's subject to change. But the fact that they've been able to stay afloat in the league, they look like right now they're solidly in the field of 64, and that they're enough of a matchup problem that they could give somebody trouble in the NCAA tournament. I think this team is talented and deep, but I feel like they're missing a real star player, and it's kind of been by committee, and it's worked for the most part. I mean, they've won some big games with that system, but overall, I think this has been a pretty solid job by this coaching staff, getting them to where they're at. Now they have to go finish the job and get it done and get some good opponents, starting with Baylor tonight at 8 p.m., hoping for a good atmosphere in Shalimar Arena. Another basketball note before we take a break. TCU women are on a little bit of a roll right now. They get a victory over Houston, 59-49. Sedona Prince back in the lineup after missing multiple weeks, really a couple months, with a broken finger. She had 15 points. Madison Connor had 11 points. This team looks good right now. It's going to be tough in the Big 12 tournament. And I feel like the job that Mark Campbell has done has been pretty incredible. They've increased their Big 12 win total by a large margin. This is now 5 games they've won in Big 12 play. One thing I did think about this weekend, though, a lot of those wins have been against new members of the league. I mean, they beat UCF. They beat BYU twice. They beat Houston yesterday. So most of these victories are coming against the new guard. And, obviously Reagan Peapley was facing a different league last year. But that being said, I think this team is much improved. And they've won some games. And given the circumstances of the season and how undermanned they were at times, they've done a great job. If you can get in the Big 12 tournament, well, I mean, you're going to the Big 12 tournament, but if you can get hot in the Big 12 tournament as a fully healthy team, can you make some noise? Now, you have to win the whole thing to make the NCAA tournament. I think that's not likely, but you can obviously play just kind of with no abandon and with house money going into that because that's what you have to do. If this team makes the NIT, though, and they can make a run, I think this could be beneficial for the program moving forward. Now, it's kind of a different situation than Jamie Dixon's first year when his team won the NIT because that group was – they're relatively young. They had some seniors, but they also had some guys who were Jamie's dudes that were just coming in. This team was mainly built for the transfer portal, and it's a lot of ladies that are in their last year of eligibility. But at the same time, I think that would be some good momentum going into next year if they could make the postseason of any sort and make a little bit of a run. So keep tabs on them as well as they try to close out the regular season. They play Tech and then West Virginia on the road and then the Big 12 tournament coming up after that. When we come back, are we going to see a 14-team playoff soon? We're moving to 12 this year. Will they immediately bump it up to 14? That's coming up next year on Locked On Horned Frogs, your team every day. We talk about them almost every day, and we need to talk about them again because they always have great deals going on. It's America's #1 sports book. FanDuel, $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's right, one $5 bet. You win it, you get $150 in bonus bets. That's at FanDuel.com/lockedon, or you can download the FanDuel app. NBA season is in full swing. Second half of the season is underway. They have quick bets, live same-game parlays, exclusive props, and more. You can bet on all your favorite teams and players at FanDuel.com/lockedon or on the FanDuel app. Again, one $5 bet. You win that bet, you get $150 in free money to play with. That's $150 if your bet wins. Take advantage of this deal right now at FanDuel.com/lockedon and shoot your shot. FanDuel is the official sportsbook partner of the NBA and a proud sponsor of the Locked On Network. So the college football playoff is expanding to 12 teams this upcoming season, and they've landed on a format of 5+7. So the 5 conference champions, the 5 highest ranked conference champions in college football, which the Big 12 should definitely be in there, will be automatic qualifiers for the college football playoff. And then there will be 7 at-large bids. And that discussion's been ongoing for the last week or so on the future of college football, where we're at. And then it came out last week that the idea of a 14-team playoff starting in the 2026 season was discussed at the CFP meetings last week, just months before the start of the first season with the 12-team playoff. This reporting comes from Heather Dinich of ESPN. Bill Hancock acknowledged the idea was discussed, but he declined to provide specific details, saying there's still work to be done. And a big part of this is, one, they're trying to push this to finalize the TV contract. Also, part of this is the Big Ten and the SEC are pushing for more automatic qualifiers. The Big Ten wants as many as 4. That's what they're asking for. And I would assume the SEC wants the same. So they're pushing for the idea of 4 Big Ten automatic qualifiers, 4 SEC automatic qualifiers. And then you would have, I guess, with those 2 teams, 3 other automatic qualifiers as conference champions, which would put you at 12, and then 2 at-large bids for the rest of college football. And I am begging Brett Yormark and the other conferences, do not go along with this. I'm fine with a 14-team playoff, but this is just simply the Big Ten and the SEC trying to throw their weight around again and saying this is where college football is going. We're in charge. You better fall in line. I don't understand why these conferences keep doing this. I don't understand these alliances that are being formed. Do not play ball with the SEC and the Big Ten. Now, the Big Ten is going to be more competitive and better with the expansion into the West Coast. I mean, Washington and Oregon are solid programs. I think Oregon's going to be in the mix every year. But we could see a scenario if you have 4 automatic Big Ten qualifiers where we could see Penn State in the playoff. Penn State, under James Franklin, their entire existence has been to be a solid team that loses to Ohio State and Michigan. It's like their very existence is they are a resume builder for Ohio State and Michigan because they always are, right there in the Big Ten race, but they lose to those schools. We could see Iowa in the playoff in the scenario. Iowa, which can't score, which finally had to fire Kirk Ferentz finally had to fire his son because they were so inept on offense that the university was like, hey, man, we can't continue this blatant nepotism. We're really bad on offense. You have to make a change here. Do not play ball with these schools. I was talking to so I do on Wednesdays, I go on 365 Sports with Paul Catalina, who's a former colleague of mine, and we just talk college football, college sports in general. The show's called The Triple Option if you want to check it out. But Paul was talking to me about how this is also we're moving quickly towards a place where the Big Ten and SEC will again lead the charge in this, but we have some sort of college football super league potentially that breaks off from the NCAA, and NIL becomes something that the schools do. Like right now, it's these NIL collectives that are loosely associated with the school, but technically it's a third party. And we're probably moving towards a place where the school pays these student athletes directly. There's potentially like collective bargaining involved. Maybe there's more of a stipend system then with endorsements on top of that you can go out and get on your own individually. But that's part of this discussion too. And Paul mentioned to me that he thinks there will be more teams involved in the Super League than we think, because everyone just kind of thinks it's the Big Ten and the SEC, and if you don't get invited to that party, then you're out. But one of the things that's been reported or speculated about with this new Super League, one of the stipulations is, hey, you're going to have this amount of money available for players. Like, you have to have this nest egg set aside, fundraised for players. And if you can't do that, then don't bother coming in, because that's the type of resources you're going to have to do this effectively. And his point was just like, he thinks there's going to be a lot of schools that if that's the stipulation, if that's the case, they're going to want to be involved. Like, they'll tell their presidents and board members, like, hey, we want to be part of this. Like, we want to be part of the big boys. And maybe in 5 to 10 years, they'll change their mind and say, actually, we don't want to do this anymore. This was more of a commitment than we thought. But at least initially, they will jump on board and be like, hey, we want to do this. We want to play at the highest level, right? There'll be a lot of schools that say, well, we've competed at the highest level before. We're not going to back out just because of monetary restrictions. And I think we could see that. But I am really hoping that these other conferences don't play ball with the Big Ten and the SEC on this, as many as 4 automatic qualifiers. And hopefully this is just a negotiation tactic and they can whittle it down. But don't let them do this. Like, they're already having the advantage of having more money. Don't give them the competitive advantage of having more teams in the playoff. Hold your ground here and don't allow this to happen. But 14-team playoff could be happening in 2026. I do wonder what it means for bowl season eventually, because I still think that's an important part of the college football fabric, is having postseason opportunities for teams that don't win, 10-plus games. But we'll just have to see how it washes out here over the next few months and years as the sport continues to change at a rapid pace. When we come back, TCU Baseball got a sweep of UCLA. We'll break that down next and close up shop. It's Locked On Horned Frogs, your team every day. So TCU started the season 3-0 in baseball. They swept Florida Gulf Coast, but it was kind of a roller coaster of a weekend at times. Like, they had to have some furious comebacks on Friday and Saturday to win. High-scoring games. Starting pitching struggled. They beat Texas State in a midweek game, and then they were playing UCLA, who was ranked in the top 20 coming into this weekend. And it was sort of like, okay, this will be a nice test for this TCU team, get a better idea of what their pitching staff looks like, how talented they are. And they passed the test. A sweep of the UCLA Bruins. The first 2 games were close. They won on Friday night by a score of 4-3. They won on Saturday 6-3. But then on Sunday, they run rule the Bruins 13-3, your final score. And they won that in 7 innings, which is fantastic. They're off to a great start. Now, a couple notes from these games. One, the starting pitching was better this weekend. Still having issues with guys going deep in games, but I think a big part of that is so early in the season. But on Friday night, Peyton Tolle went 5 innings, 3 hits, 2 runs, did walk 4, but also struck out 7. He looked much more comfortable than he did the week before. Carson Bowen hit a 2-run home run that gave the Frogs an early 2-0 lead. He's looking fantastic at the plate early on this season. Anthony Silva had a sac fly that scored Peyton Chattenay, and that gave them a 3-0 lead. Ultimately, the Frogs hold on. Bullpen did a nice job. Kyle Ayers came in relief of Tolle. Zach Coyer, the MCC transfer, who's been one of the main high-leverage options so far this year, he gave them 2/3 of an inning, and then Ben Abel came in and shut the door and was really – I don't think he gave up a hit. He didn't give up a hit or a walk. He did have like a 16-pitch at bat with the UCLA pinch hitter who kept fouling off his pitches, but ultimately got it done, and the Frogs won. So they come back on Saturday, and they win that ball game 6-3. Cole Klecker was effective. Didn't go real deep in the game. Only 4 1/3, 6 hits, 1 run, 1 earned, 3 strikeouts. Was starting to get touched up a little bit towards the end of that outing. But the story from a pitching perspective, at least, the story of Saturday was Braden Sloan. Braden Sloan was the Frogs' Tuesday starter for most of last year as a true freshman. I know the coaching staff is excited about him. Jacob Saylor's told me that on the preview podcast that we did last week, Sloan went 2 2/3, 3 hits, 2 runs, and 2 earned, but that was mainly all that came in the 7th inning when things unraveled a little bit. But in the 5th and the 6th, he came in with runners on 1st and 3rd and 1 out, got a strikeout, and then got out of the inning with a pop out, I think, with the next batter. Had a really clean inning in the 6th, ran into a little bit of trouble in the 7th. But Sloan's looked good from the left-hand side, just bringing it and doing nice things for the Frogs so far. Chase Hoover actually got the save. He closed that out. Zach Collier came in again and threw an inning in a 3rd. Byrne had another home run, a 3-run shot in the 6th that kind of broke that game open and gave the Frogs a 6-1 lead. Brody Green had a nice weekend at the plate. Jack Basser had a nice weekend at the plate. And Jack was in the lineup for 2 straight days because Peyton Tolle got 2 days in a row off. So he pitched Friday night and hit, and he did not hit on Saturday and Sunday. So Kirk Sarloo said after the game that, he was just kind of giving him some rest. His timing was a little bit off, giving him a couple days off. TCU plays 2 midweek games. They play on Tuesday and Wednesday this week. But I tweeted about this. I was like, it was just interesting they gave him a couple of days off. Somebody responded to me and said, well, he hasn't been hitting much anyway. And I totally get that. But this team looks great. Like, they look really good. If they're going to reach their full potential, Peyton Tolle is going to have to be a factor in the middle of this lineup. So, yes, I agree with you. He hasn't been hitting the ball well so far, and I assume this was just kind of a couple of days to get in the right headspace and get going again. But if this team is going to reach, Omaha and beyond, Peyton Tolle needs to be a big part of the equation, both on the mound and hitting as well. And then yesterday, TCU from the start, they put up 5 runs in the 1st inning and never looked back as they won 13-3 over UCLA. Zach Morris had kind of a rough start to the game, loaded the bases, but ended up going 4 innings, 3 hits, 2 runs, struck out 5. Cademan Parker did some nice work over 2 innings, and then Andrew Mosiello closed it out with 1 inning of work. And everybody hit the ball. Peyton Chatinier led the game off with a home run to give them a 1-0 lead. Curtis Byrne had an RBI. Carson Bowen had a couple RBIs. He had a single in the 1st, had a 2-run homer later in the game, a sac fly as well. Brody Green had a single that scored a run. Sam Myers had a 2-run single to center in the 2nd inning that scored a few runs. Everybody was hitting baseball yesterday. So this TCU team looks good so far. They got a couple midweek games against Washington State on Tuesday, Arizona on Wednesday, and then they go to Globe Life Field this weekend where they play USC on Friday, and then Saturday. Oh, man, I should have the schedule in front of me. I know they play USC on Friday and Sunday, and they have a Saturday game against Arizona State. Sandwich in between there. But a great 7-0 start for TCU baseball as they continue their hot start to the season. We'll be back tomorrow. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts. It's Locked On Horned Frogs, your team every day.